Welcome to the Strategic Pursuit Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Macias, and today we got a special guest. His name is David Gilbert. David, it is great to have you.
Thanks for having me, Brandon. Happy to be here, man.
Awesome. Dave, let's jump right in. Let's talk about your background. Give us a little bit of a summary before the acquisition.
Yeah, a lot of my career was entrepreneurship. So started early on in hard money lending, being a loan officer. I did some real estate development, and that was right when I was graduating college. Started a credit risk software company. So we did credit risk analytics for credit unions all over the US. And then I started a couple companies. I did an e-commerce company that failed, a MarTech consulting company. And then I worked for a big cybersecurity firm called Sophos, based in Oxford, the office of all over North America, and traveled globally, which was super fun. And then I wanted to go back into smaller companies. So I read Buy Then Build and kind of changed my outlook on buying versus starting. M&A kind of opened up to me, which I wasn't really familiar with this type of M&A before. And then I closed on my first company, Proven, November of 2023. Same month, I also brokered a large property management company. And then 6 months later, we closed on a traffic engineering firm. So that brings me today where I run Proven full time as a CEO.
Amazing. I want to know how you got to finding this business. I know you talked about a lot of networking. How important was that, into getting these businesses and closing these deals?
I think anytime you can talk to sellers, even if it's a listed company on the market, you're going to have a leg up from other people, right? So much of the selling process is just a relationship and the sellers liking who they're selling to and believing in their vision and what they can do. So, part of my process was not only looking on online marketplaces, but also trying to reach out to as many people in the industry that I was interested in as possible. So I had a ton of different meetings with different owners, and I had met the guys that I bought this from about a year before we bought it. And the engineering firm, was one of those where we just found it online, met with the seller, and it was a good fit. But the accounting firm took a lot longer, and they had a lot of other offers, and they ultimately picked me because I had reached out to them and they knew me for a while.
Why did you end up going into accounting? Was there any thought into going blue collar, or was it always kind of that white collar industry that you were seeing yourself in?
Well, for me, my background was in white collar, and so I didn't want to be overly confident in going into an industry that I had no clue about, really. That would have been a blue collar business. It would be super interesting to go into it, but it also felt like a lot more risk for me personally. Now, hindsight, maybe not, but it felt that way at the time. So I tried to look at what businesses were the closest to being in tech that I could find. And although it wasn't tech, it was close, right? And we still do a lot of things that are really close to running a tech company. So that's ultimately why I ended up picking accounting over blue collar. When I realized I wanted to start buying companies, I thought that was something I wanted to do long term. So I looked at, if I want to do this long term, what's a good way I can get deal flow? And to me, that was accounting, right? Since we do the books for a lot of companies. I know when they're going to sell. Typically, we know years ahead of time. So if we're in the right industries, it's something I can choose to go into other industries that I'm interested in and know about the companies before they sell.
Absolutely. That's a great foundation, right? If the goal is to acquire more businesses, you
Yeah.
can always funnel those leads and do the diligence portion yourself. That makes total sense. Now, talk to me about the difference between a CFO and an accounting business.
Okay. So there's lots of different types of accounting businesses in the world, right? Especially in like the US and Canada. You've got a lot of firms that are very tax focused. So they're going to focus on doing taxes for individuals or businesses. And there's even niches within that. So there'll be tax prep companies. All they'll do is tax prep, or tax filing companies, or expat companies that will do taxes just for people that have moved away and that still need to file taxes to other countries. So just within tax, there's niches within that. And with other accounting firms, there's firms that will just do bookkeeping. So bookkeeping is typically reconciliations, categorizations of the accounts and the transactions that are happening monthly in a company, matching those with bank statements, closing those books, providing the three basic financial statements, a P&L, balance sheet, and a cash flow statement. Also typically includes payroll services, accounts payable, so the bills that you need to pay, accounts receivable, and then sometimes it includes sales tax, which we do as well. And then it's very much backwards looking. So it's doing the day to day of the things that need to get done in a company, like making payroll, paying bills, right, and getting paid on the invoices that are out. Whereas a CFO is very much forward looking. So they're looking at forecasting. They're looking at forecasting like the head count. If you're going to grow by double your size, when can you afford to hire someone and when, or how many people, right? Or if you're growing in location, when can you afford to get a new location? Um, or looking at, are your prices optimized for the industry that you're in? Or are you getting the best rates from your vendors that you should be getting? Or optimizing your cash if you're going intercontinental or intercountry, like between countries, right? Or capital raising if you need to go raise capital or get bank debt. Maybe you need to redo the debt that you have, recapitalize that debt. So
Mm.
CFO and accounting functions are very, very different. CFO is functioning on higher level, and accounting is focused on what's going on in the day to day. So that's typically the difference in the two.
Yeah, yeah, no, seems very corporate rather than something more personal, smaller
Mhm.
as far as that goes. Now, when you guys, going back to the CFO, keeping all of this data and tracking all of these, different moving parts, do you guys have systems and softwares in place internally, or is this the professionals kind of just constantly doing their research?
Yeah, we do have a ton of tools that we use. So we have an internal tool that we've custom built with AI built into it. And that helps us with being really efficient with our clients, getting matching data that maybe not match from a ledger. So a ledger is just uh, it's a software that connects with the bank, whatever bank it is, and then pulls in the transactions to categorize the transactions and help you know how you're doing from an income, revenue, expense perspective. And so we use a lot of different ledgers. Some of the big ones are QuickBooks Online, Zero. Those are probably the most popular globally. Zero, I believe, started in Australia, has less of a presence in North America as QuickBooks Online does, but it's grown a lot. So it has a good foothold. And there are a lot of up and coming other ledgers that are using AI a lot more than QuickBooks and Zero are, that are doing really well. But we do use those, both of those. There's NetSuite, which is more enterprise. We do use those. And there's a bunch of others. So we use tech for payroll, for accounts payable, for accounts receivable. We have our own internal communication with Slack. So we use a ton of tech within our company for all the different things that need to get done.
Especially now with AI, a lot of people are, you know, they're bringing in all this technology, using different tools as far as AI goes. I'd love to hear which are actually working and which are, kind of faulty still, which obviously everything is changing from day to day, so it's hard to keep up to. But that's awesome. Let's pivot to the actual deal. Can you talk about the numbers and how that looked like? What were you forecasting?
On the accounting deal.
Yeah,
So yeah, we bought the company. We closed around 2.8 million was the purchase price. We had another 500,000 roughly of working capital plus fees, etc. And the business was doing about 2.1 million of revenue, and EBITDA was at about 750, or at least we thought it was about 750.
it looks like a good deal.
It did. Yeah, it for
Yeah.
sure did. Yeah, it seems like a decent multiple, normal valuation, pretty good revenue. They had good revenue growth as well over the last few years. So it seemed like a good deal on paper.
Now talk to me about what you ended up kind of unraveling as you close that acquisition.
So we closed and it was a little tricky. EBITDA was closer to 250 instead of 750, which was a little heartbreaking and hard. But we cut a lot of costs and made some changes. And a lot of that had to do with just ad backs that were incorrect. There was a lot of family members involved in the business, and
Mhm.
a lot of the ad backs were just off. And we had some ad backs of some people who had left who they said weren't critical to the business, and I don't think they were, but I don't know if they should have been an ad back or not. Um, and then we had some higher costs from some of our CFOs who their comp had changed right after we closed, so that was a higher expense. And then we had higher concentration risk than we anticipated.
What changed with the CFOs?
So let's say that you're compensated $100,000 per year, and if you start managing more money, let's say that your compensation increases by 20% or 30% based on the amount of money that that you're managing. So as we bought in business, a couple of those CFOs, their compensation changed, which caused increased costs on our side.
And was there any way of you seeing this when you were doing your due diligence?
Maybe um, if we would have spent a lot of time really digging into the variable comp, we might have caught that. I don't think I would buy another company with a lot of family members involved because those were a lot of the ad backs. That was really
Yeah.
hard to tell what was a legitimate ad back and what wasn't. So I definitely went there. We just had a lot of ad backs from the sellers. And it's what's funny is it's not uncommon to have accounting firms that are trying to break even and just like bare minimum on their P&L. So it wasn't that big of a surprise, at least from an outsider's perspective.
Definitely a blind spot, it seems. If you have a family business, a bunch of family members working in there, ad backs, you're really kind of focusing on cleaning that up and understanding all of that. There was that hidden piece, that blind spot that you guys really missed, which was unfortunate because you guys, you learned the hard way.
That's right.
Now, did you kind of get worried about that this was a family-owned business and there was uh, quite a few family members getting paid from the business?
Yeah, it did cause me to have a red flag. Not that a lot of family members were getting paid, but just that they had a lot of family involved and how critical they were to the business running. So I don't know that a lot of them were critical, like most of them were not. Although there were some rifts within the family. So some of them were actually doing uh, things that maybe some other members didn't think were as critical, but they were. So
Mhm.
yeah, that is a little bit of a red flag. I probably wouldn't do that again.
Now, what ended up happening to this? I mean, you obviously ended up with a significantly less amount of EBITDA. How many employees were there, and how did you have to cut costs to make this thing work?
So we started with about 20 employees. Now we have about 12. And we had to cut down on our rent. So our rent was pretty expensive. We had an agreement with the sellers to use that for a year, but we didn't really need a big office space. So we got rid of that. Um, we hired some offshore help to help with some things that we were doing that has been helpful, and just really redoing some of our variable comp with the way that we pay our C-level executives and be a lot more mindful about that. So all those things have really helped, and we've cut down on different software that we were using, et cetera.
And you guys continue to do, I believe I remember you guys cut the accounting part of the business out, so it's just CFO?
No, we still do accounting too. Yeah, that's still a big part
Okay.
of what we do. Yep.
Okay. So right now, is it a 50-50 split within the accounting and the CFO, or
No, it's more like 70-30. We still do a big chunk of what we do is still accounting.
you really had to turn around that business? It's been what, 2 years now? How long did that turnaround and that stabilization take you?
Honestly, it's taken this whole time. The first
Yeah.
year was really just figuring out if we could keep doing the structure that they had in place. And we realized about 8 months in that we couldn't. And so we kind of made those changes the first part of last year. And then we saw the effects from those the later part of the year as we made those changes, as people left because they didn't, it was different for them. And some accountants didn't like talking to clients, different things like that. So it really, I think it takes about a year with a service organization to kind of stabilize when you make big changes, depending on the staff and their comfort level with changes. And accountants typically don't like change.
Is everybody new as far as employees go? Did you keep any of the old employees?
Yeah, we do have some old employees, but we do have a lot of new employees too that have been new over the last year, year and a half.
And you feel that was critical for.
It's hard to make changes, but we had a lot of students at our organization before, and so it's inevitable that they were going to leave. They were early on in their careers, so I think the seller's plan was to grow them within the company. But the reality is this: most students, even if they like your company early on, they have other plans of things that they want to do as they grow.
Yeah. I can imagine it was a tough pill to swallow throughout this process, but you managed to get out of the weeds and, get yourself kind of grounded again and stabilized. That's a lot of sleepless nights, man. That
Yeah,
is.
it was. Yeah, I lost a lot of sleep over it for sure.
I'm glad to hear that. What's the future looking like? Any big plans as far as the business goes within the next year?
Well, we're still looking for other companies to acquire. So for proven, so accounting, HR, consulting companies. So we're looking at more to acquire to grow. We also rebranded from Proven CFO to Proven. We've added other services. We've niched down into mostly focus on construction and trade businesses. So we've been doing really well with those businesses, and we want to keep working with those businesses. We of course work with other industries, but those are the industries we're focusing on right now.
Amazing. And again, just to touch on the tech AI tool side, is there anything that you've started using recently that has been, really working out for you guys or, you could recommend?
It depends on if you're an accountant or not. Well, there's a lot of tools I'd recommend if you're in accounting. If just general tools, we've used Lovable. If you're familiar with it, we've built some internal tools with that, which has been super helpful.
Yes, I've heard of Lovable. Kind of can create apps and websites, all that. Awesome, man. Thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate your time and sharing, that journey that you went through. We should definitely do this again because I want to know what other businesses you acquire with Proven and continue your success.
Sounds good, Brandon. Thanks for having me on.